Kia ora. Tēnei te mihi ki te mana whenua, te atiawa, i ngā tito rangatira, ki ngā iwi, ki ngā hapu, ki ngā raurangatira mā. Ka nui te mihi, ka nui te aroha. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's 1985, the height of the Cold War. President Ronald O. Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev are at the Geneva Peace Summit. It's their first meeting. In a private conversation, Reagan asked Gorbachev something quite extraordinary. If the United States were attacked by aliens, would you come to our aid? Gorbachev didn't hesitate, no doubt about it, probably in a Russian accent. Reagan replied simply, we would too. At that moment, the barriers of ideology, politics and power dissolved. They imagined a threat so large, so beyond their control, that it made them human first and leader second. You may have heard this story before. I actually only recently came across it because I'm a bit slow. But I was struggling at that time with some sort of existential crisis. Just increasing angst about the state of the world. Post-COVID, Parliament occupations, the current cost of living crisis, 8,000 public servants made redundant, angst about the state of the world and this desire to make sense of an increasingly complex swirl of geopolitics, technological and climate issues, coupled with my own journey through menopause, empty nesting and ageing, and wondering about my personal value and relevance in this future world. I picked up this book at the Wellington Airport. It's still there if you want one. And this is the opening anecdote, and I was hooked. The Power of Crisis. If you had a chance to look at the abstract that I wrote for my talk today, some months ago, I talk about crisis as a critical motivator, the ultimate catalyst for an innovation mindset. And let me just turn my page. There is a reason why our military are so good at innovation, and they receive quite a bit of money to do so. They are working in a crisis-like context, big problems with big consequences if we don't get it right, that require great solutions with urgency. That is the perfect conditions for innovation and cultivating an innovation mindset, although not, obviously, a comfortable place to be. Let's look at this from another perspective and shift from politics and planetary crisis to physics. So, the second law of thermodynamics, say that fast, tells us that in a closed system, everything tends towards disorder. Entropy, heat dissipates, structures unravel, energy scatters. Left untouched, things fall apart. But here's the kicker, life is not a closed system. In nature and in people, something magical happens to us under pressure. The technical term is perturbation. When a system is jolted, stretched, or destabilized from the outside, and instead of collapsing, it adapts, it reorders, it becomes more complex and more capable. Stress doesn't just test systems, it transforms them. Evolution requires disruption. Resilience is built, not born. It's the same in our communities, our organisations, and in our lives. We don't change when we're comfortable, we change when the world pushes hard enough to wake us up. Sometimes in workshops I lead, I talk about this as a joke, that we think that life lessons should come to us on unicorns, riding rainbows that kiss us gently on the forehead and whisper, sweet soul, here's your life lesson. Rather, it's more like a Mack truck, boof, growth spurt. Disturbance isn't the end of stability, it's the beginning of capacity. Perturbation is nature's version of innovation, and humans, with our flaws and our fears and our fabulous brains, we are built for this. The key difference between entropy and evolution is that evolution is intentional. So a good question to ask is, how do we stress our systems on purpose, with care, with foresight, in order to build the future we want before crisis will build it for us? The response is disruption. It is the innovation mindset. It means recognising that discomfort is data, that disruption is not the enemy, it is the signal that change is possible. It's a belief that what is breaking is also beckoning. The best ideas don't come necessarily in times of calm, they emerge when old ways stop working. In this way, perturbation isn't just a physics principle, it's a creative posture. And innovation isn't just a process, it's response to being alive in a world that just won't stay still. So the real question isn't how do we avoid disruption or crisis, it's how do we become the kind of people and institutions that know what to do when it arrives. I'm not sure of the origins of this slide, but I actually came across it when I was working at Te Papa. And we used it often in the early days of Mahuki, and that's the innovation hub that we built for the culture and heritage sector right here in Wellington. This slide took out the tech likely to disrupt the glam sector, the museum world. And I knew I wanted to use this slide in today's talk, so I went and hunted it out. And I opened it up, and I was about to grab my pen to draw a big red circle around artificial intelligence, except it's not there. Not even a whisper. Oh, I've gone too far. Which is wild, right? Because AI was around then. Machine learning had been evolving quietly in the background. The seeds were planted, GPT existed, algorithms were already shaping our news feeds, but it wasn't yet as visible. It hadn't yet hit the cultural or institutional radars. It was still in the domain of academics, niche engineers, and sci-fi buffs. And then, as disruption often does, it all arrived all at once. Not gradually, but exponentially. Over the past 18 months, AI has gone from abstract theory to dinner table conversation. It's writing our documents, making our art, reshaping education, and it's asking us uncomfortable questions about identity, ethics, and power. Like all disruptive technologies, it has arrived with a dual nature, excitement and concern, potential and risk. This line of thinking was inspired by the brilliant futurist, another Wellingtonian, Melissa Clark-Reynolds, and I was at a recent workshop of hers. Her view, which I know is probably quite old news to this audience, but is that AI is not a tool that we use occasionally, but it's the platform that underpins everything. She likened it to electricity. These quotes are over 100 years old, from the 1880s, when electricity was first being introduced to the public. And the reaction? Panic, fear, warnings of moral collapse and physical danger. I especially love, is this just another toy for rich? And will it lead to moral decay and insanity? Sound familiar? Electricity, the very thing that powers this building, these screens, was once the most feared and misunderstood force of its time, and yet here we are. And Melissa noted that with the arrival of these fundamental forces, electricity, the internet, heck, even the wheel, more jobs were created and humankind took an exponential leap forward. But we can't be thoughtless. The pace of change, technological change, is outstripping our ability to consider the consequences and to regulate for it. AI, like everything else, requires thoughtfulness. Let's remember that in order for us to have clean AI, that is content that is not violent, traumatic, or sexually explicit, thousands of workers in Kenya, in the Philippines, and elsewhere who are paid below living wage, probably, and exposed to severe psychological trauma, clean it for us. AI centres consume vast amounts of electricity, often from fossil fuel and sources. They use millions of litres of water per day to cool servers. Who owns the data that trains it? AI. AI systems are often trained on data scraped without consent, including Indigenous knowledge. This mirrors extractive colonial models. On the flip side, there's a risk of automated erasure if AI models don't take Indigenous knowledge systems into account. AI systems reflect the biases of the societies that build them, and they can scale harm invisibly. Does or will AI entrench a digital elite where most people and nations have no say in how the future unfolds? But look, I'm not going to deliver a technical course on AI because actually I'm not equipped or knowledgeable enough to do some, and there are other people in the room that can do that better. But what I wanted to do was invite you to look at AI as we would look at fire, flight, or electricity. Something that we can approach with both caution, but also creativity. Not to panic, not to blindly adopt, but to sit in that middle space where we interrogate the risks while still imagining what might be possible. And for me, that journey and that possibility started by looking not at AI itself, but at the infrastructure it depends on. The pipes beneath the surface, the nervous system of our digital world. And that's why my attention turned toward cyber. I call it cyber, and I mean cybersecurity, but to me it has also become much bigger than that. It has become an innovation mindset. It began with 3 books that left a huge imprint on me. The Power of Crisis I've talked about, Sandy Hook, and Your Face Belongs to Us. Sandy Hook is heart-wrenching. It begins with the unthinkable, the mass shooting of kindergarten-aged children in the United States. But as devastating as that was, what followed was as disturbing, and actually it was freaking bonkers. The book traces the whakapapa of disinformation, showing how conspiracy theorists weaponized social media, claiming the shooting was staged. Parents who had lost their children were harassed, stalked, and accused of being actors. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a case study in how the truth can fracture in a digital age. Your Face Belongs to Us looks at another frontier, which is facial recognition technology. My biggest takeaway, our faces, yours, mine, almost everyone's, they were scraped off the internet or the social media some time ago to train the algorithms behind the tech. This book is also a warning about society's fascination with the plucky startup, which is strange for me to say because much of my career has been about supporting entrepreneurs and startups. Around the same time, I was deep into one of my favourite genres, other than disaster movies, British crime drama. And it struck me, actually, just how heavily surveilled the UK is, because that's what the police were going to quite often. Cameras on every corner, facial recognition in play. And yet, they still didn't realise who was the criminal, even though I'd worked it out a couple of episodes ago. But hold that thought, we're going to come back to surveillance later. But with all of that in mind, disinformation, surveillance, facial recognition, pattern recognition became really front of mind for me. And pattern recognition, as it turns out, is yet another core innovation mindset. And that's what pulled me towards cyber innovation, not just as a technical issue, but as a powerful lens to explore privacy, power, identity, and protection in a digital age. I was also interested in whether cyber could be an opportunity for economic advancement, in particular used to create high-value jobs for our rangatahi. And that's where I started digging. And that's where the next part of the story unfolds, with a research trip to the UK last year to meet with the UK's cyber innovation partner, Plexel Global, and to take a deeper dive look into how our security, our sovereignty, and our digital futures are being braided together. Plexel believes that a secure society is prosperous, and a prosperous society is secure. Let that sit with you for a minute. I'm not sure that we spend a lot of time thinking about our security, or thinking about it not just as a technical field or our defence, our military, but as a strategic enabler. The quiet architecture that underpins our sovereignty, our safety, our ability to innovate with confidence. And that's when I became interested in what would it look like for Aotearoa, for Māori, to lead in cyber. Not just to catch up, but to leap ahead. What were the opportunities to create jobs and enterprise in this field? So we travelled to London and to Manchester to meet with some of the world's most forward-thinking cyber innovators. The first stop, Plexel Global, is based in East London's Olympic Park. It's a humming ecosystem of startups, public sector specialists. Even the V&A Museum is based out of their premises now. It's strategic thinkers designing solutions for the most complex digital threats of our time. 2 days later, We were at the DISH, the Digital Innovation Security Hub in Manchester. What attracted me to the DISH was their focus on growing the UK's future workforce, and knowing that that workforce had to be diverse, from all walks of life, races, cultures, genders, because literally lives are at stake. The future will need visionaries, and they have been building programs and pathways from education to employment in order to support this need and this future workforce. At the DISH, we met with lawyers, policymakers, entrepreneurs, and former intelligence experts, all converging around one shared truth. Cyber isn't a sector, it's a system, and it's under pressure. Well, I've talked to many people about cyber as an innovation mindset, a lens. It's often been hard to get people to think beyond what we already know, cybersecurity. But even cybersecurity isn't just about two-factor authentication or good password practices. It's a thing. Let me tell you a story. So during our trip to London, obviously we were there to look at cyber, and so we did have that filter on. But the day we landed in London, Transport for London, or the Underground, was dealing with a live cyber incident that had been unfolding over months. Imagine having to manage a cyber incident and safely transporting hundreds of thousands of people every day. Morning television ran a story about the rising epidemic of sextortation. I don't know if I said that right, but you know what I'm talking about. Individuals being blackmailed using stolen or fabricated intimate images. I took this photo off the TV in my hotel room. Another headline warned about Londoners not using their phones in public, or rather being more mindful about how they use their phones, not just looking at them and not aware of their surroundings. Because in a single year, the year before, 78,000 devices had been stolen off the streets, many ending up overseas, being stripped for parts. But the phones weren't necessarily the real prize. The real value lays in the data, the photos, the contacts, the passwords, banking apps, the identity fragments that could be stitched together to defraud not just the victim, but their whānau, their workplace, maybe even their government. And when we landed back in New Zealand, the story was of the Hezbollah supply chain attack, where communication devices, because terrorists don't use mobile phones which can be tracked, they're using these pages, but they had been rigged with explosives detonated across Lebanon, killing dozens and injuring thousands. It's one of the first known cyber physical attacks on a supply chain. One of our speakers in Manchester was trying to explain the Internet of Things and the critical importance of that when we were over there, and I just didn't get it until I came back and saw this one. One of the most interesting meetings, though, was with UK cyber lawyer and forensic IT expert Emma Green. Emma's client list includes retailers, law firms, real estate agencies, just everyday businesses of all sizes, because hackers don't discriminate, and small entities actually might just be easier to infiltrate. What they would do, and she had just had a recent attack of a real estate company, is they would sit in a company's email systems, waiting for a major transaction, a house sale, and then they struck, sending a fraudulent invoice just in time. The branding matched, the timing was perfect, the money was gone. The emotional financial toll, devastating. I'm not sure if any of you have been had a cyber incident. I have, and it's not just the money. The money actually wasn't that much, but actually I felt real shame and like I'd been really silly. So there's a whole sort of emotional thing that's wrapped around all of this as well. In the UK, cyber insurance is now standard. To secure government contracts, companies must pass rigorous cyber accreditations. Every device, every phone, laptop, endpoint must be logged and secure. I think we can expect a similar requirement here in the not-so-distant future, not just in terms of insurance, and you should have that already, but the stringent procurement requirements if you want to engage with the government. Emma told us hackers have help desks. They can buy products off the shelf. They're organised. They're commercially motivated, and weirdly, they're honourable. Once you pay the ransom, they usually leave you alone. It's part of their brand, and their business model depends on it. Our final meeting was with Phil Swan, who's the Director of Digital for Greater Manchester. Earlier, we had heard about the UK government's cyber force, where an initial 2,000 people had been recruited for offensive cyber. that's not just looking to protect or be defensive, but actually preempting possible attacks. They said with a wink, we may or may not have been involved in the Ukraine. From a very New Zealand-centric perspective, I asked him, how do people feel about that in Manchester? You know, this rise in this sort of offensive capability, because it felt like something people might protest. Phil looked at me a little bit confused. You see, this is the city where 22 people died at the Ariana Grande concert in 2017. People here have accepted that additional surveillance and some additional security is a trade-off that they're willing to make. In New Zealand, though, we have a level of protection in Aotearoa that we should treasure, and we have an opportunity to safeguard it and learn from the rest of the world as the dark side of cyber invariably makes its way further down under. So what does this all mean for us here in Aotearoa in the culture and heritage sector? Well, funny you should ask. I actually happen to have this little company. And, and if innovation is the mindset that lets us evolve under pressure, then we also need a method, a framework for how we move from anxiety to action. So the model I've been shaping over the last few years has many parts, but today I wanted to share just two, because I believe these two done well can actually unlock a lot of the others. It starts with crafting powerful challenges. At the heart of innovation is the ability to ask better questions and to frame your challenges so that you can share them with others and have them help you solve them. At Bird Island, we talk about framing challenges in a way that others can fall in love with. At Mahuki, we had 10 key challenges that had been developed in co-design with our community. The impact of that is twofold. First, the system, the entrepreneurs, the scientists, the policymakers, the museum professionals, the students, etc., get an insight into our world. In the case of Mahuki, for many, that was the first time some of the communities that we don't normally engage with understood that beyond our core purpose of being museums, we were major event organisers, retailers, places of scientific research. We needed wayfinding, we needed to track where people were, audience insights, all of that. Secondly, that it's worth their while to work on our challenges because we want them solved, and that's a potential commercial opportunity. I wanted to briefly segue into another way of looking at challenges that we haven't even contemplated. So I serve on the board of the Mary Potter Hospice. We're about end-of-life care. Over the last little while, we've had to confront some pretty big and meaty issues. Firstly, our position on end-of-life legislation, and in technology, digital legacies. Navigating the end-of-life legislation was easier for us because we had a clear North Star and we'd done the thinking before. We had built and lived over the decades of our existence a set of values and principles about the way that we did things. In our work, we neither hasten nor prolong life. Now, that doesn't say anything about the end-of-life legislation and how we all might personally feel about it, but it helped us as an organisation grappling with something monumentally disruptive to manage our way through it. We haven't done all of the deep thinking in digital legacies, but that's also not specific to us, it's specific to all of us. But we recognise that like making a will, having a power of attorney, we all need to consider and specify what we want to happen with our likeness, our digital footprint, and our voice after we die. So the second challenge is engaging your stack. So this comes from a term from this guy called Brad Feld, and he's written a book called Startup Communities. He says that innovation isn't a solo act, it's a team sport. While it's a little dated now, it describes how in Boulder, Colorado, in the US, became a surprising tech startup hub, punching way above its weight. And this happened because a bunch of investors decided that that was where they wanted to live, and they wanted to make their new home amazing. So they did so by engaging the stack. You need your full stack. Entrepreneurs, funders, researchers, policymakers, the whole shebang. You need to involve everyone in helping create an environment where creativity and entrepreneurship thrive, innovation thrives. They talk about it being like atoms colliding, except people making innovation magic. At Plexel, they describe it as the triad: private enterprise, government, and academia. In Aotearoa, there are probably a lot more communities that we would want to include, including iwi, in our community and audiences. But how do you set challenges and engage your stack in a space like cyber, where so much is classified? In Manchester, they gave us a powerful metaphor. We work behind a permeable membrane. We are clear about what we must be protected, but we're radically open with the rest. Because if we don't share, if we fall behind, the nation's security suffers. That, to me, is an innovation mindset at work. Holding protection and openness in tension, knowing what to lock down and what to open up. And in this environment, protecting diversity, equity, and inclusion has never been more important. And it's super important for the mindsets and talent that we need for our future workforce. In the latest Institute of Directors newsletter, and that's another organisation that I'm a director of, it discusses the fortunes of two major US retailers, Costco and Target, and how they responded to the US government demands to end DEI policies. Target retreated and has faced intense backlash with 11 consecutive weeks of falling foot traffic. In contrast, Costco held its course and maintained a clear DEI focus and has seen 16 consecutive weeks of rising traffic. So what does engaging your stack mean for museums and cultural institutions? Because you too have a stack. Are they excited about your problems? And if not, have you invited them in? And that's not just outreach, that's ecosystem building, or put another way, it's systems thinking, the ultimate innovation mindset. Innovation isn't just what we do, it's how we rise together in times of pressure. And maybe the disruptions we're facing right now aren't just trying to break us, they're trying to grow us, perturbate us into the kind of leaders, collaborators, and systems thinking leaders that this moment needs. We need to become master perturbators. That's an old joke. So over the past year, I've been lucky enough to work alongside some remarkable organisations, from major institutions, Indigenous consultancies, to grassroots kaupapa and te taitokoro, aimed to help people who are grappling with those big problems and challenges, to name them, frame them, and build systems that can carry them forward. But always, it's in the service of unlocking potential. Because innovation doesn't just happen when one brilliant person has an idea. It happens when the right people come together around the right problem with enough trust to do something bold. And that's what I care about, helping organisations create the conditions for boldness. So, look, I'm into the home stretch now, guys. I was trying to work up a powerful ending, somehow to weave in the whole Ronald Reagan aliens thing, because yesterday was also May the 4th, be with you. And I was a bit stuck, and I thought, well, you know, I think I'll start with creating some visuals on AI, because they sometimes sort of like generate some, you know, creativity and innovation within me. So I tried to imagine myself as an alien, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. So, but the first thing is I thought, okay, so I put my photo into AI and asked it to imagine me as an alien. Incredible, right? It's like looking in a mirror. I was like, amazing, this thing really gets me, it knows what I'm about. And then puffed up with this new confidence, I thought, okay, let's try again. Okay, yeah, I'm loving it. A little less of what I thought I was, but blue people, avatar, let's do it. And then you guessed it, okay, yeah, okay, let's try it one more time. It's a little bit different. I'm not sure about this, where you're going, but okay, yeah, it's a little bit more alien-like. And then, you know, in the famous words of Britney Spears, oops, I did it again. I thought I'll just give it one more go. The big reveal. Come on now. Was it upset with me? I don't know. But I was definitely feeling some perturbation. So despite all our disruption, despite the threats, the tech and the tangled geopolitics, despite the weird and wonderful future we're stepping into, we're still gloriously human. Messy, creative, trying our best. It's not a straight line, it's long, winding, imperfect journey that deserves our thoughtfulness, and it's one worth taking together. Ngā mihi, mahana kia koutou.